It's a new year. It's time for a new project. Nice simple one. Don't want to do anything too complicated to kick off the year. Some nice hot coffee and yeah, hopefully you've had a good festive period wherever you are in the world and life hasn't been too awful. I want to keep things nice and simple. I don't want to do anything massively complicated this time round. So I need to do two things. I'm still on my mission to get rid of as much fabric as I can that I've already got in stock so that I can start afresh with things and make some space. And we need some cushion covers because we only have one set. Now I made these longer ago than I care to remember, and they are made from one set of cushion covers and some fabric that I had at the time. And I needed twice as many cushion covers as I had. Couldn't get the size I wanted, so I just split apart the ones I'd got and added backs. That worked really well, and these have lasted a lot longer than I ever planned them to. This time I want to make some, but I don't want to do any zips, buttons, press studs, nothing. I want to do completely no fixing covers, and I want to make it as simple as possible. Now I did learn, as I was putting all of this together, that you can do this out of one piece of fabric if you're smart with your measuring. I'll demonstrate that in a bit. But we're not going to do that because I'm using up what I've got in my stash to make a set that are sort of along these kind of lines, sort of not. First task is to decide what size you want your cushion cover to be. If you've already got a filler or a cushion cover, that's really easy. You just draw around what you've got basically. If not, you're going to have to figure that out based on how big the cushion you want to be is going to be, what size fillers you can get, or just how big your fabric is that you're using. In our case, we know that these are completely square, so they're the same along here as they are along here. And these measure about 17 inches without your seam allowance. So do remember to add on a bit extra for your seam allowance if you need it. 17 inches is about 43 centimetres if you're doing this in metric. Now, if you are keeping the fillers that you've got, these are quite old fillers so they're a bit tired now. One way to make them just go a little bit longer is make your cushion cover just a smidge smaller, and then it just tightens everything up a little bit. You can also double up old fillers if you can't get replacement ones for whatever reason. I'm just going to reuse these, they'll do for now, it's fine. So once you've got your size, we don't need this bit. You want one piece out of your fabric that you're going to use on one side. And this is just a simple square. It's no more complicated than that. Because I'm using my leftovers, I'm using different fabrics for different sides of the cushions, and I've just picked out what sort of goes together and goes with decor. For the other side, your final measurements will be your 17-inch square, but this is actually two pieces because you need an overlap. So the way that I decided how to do this was I looked at the biggest scrap of the fabric that I'd got, and that gave me an idea of what my overlap was going to be. So in this case, if we measure 17.5, that gives us a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we line them up like that. You can see that's our overlap section there, and that measures about 5.5 inches from there to there. This will make a bit more sense when we construct it. But it's important that you have a fairly decent overlap here because you don't want your cushion inner popping out through this piece here. And if you've ever done your housewife style pillowcases on your bed, this is kind of the same technique, but instead of having the opening at the end here, we're having it sort of halfway down the cushion, or a third down the cushion. If you're making these in one piece, you just need to make one big rectangle like this. The important things to remember is where your fold lines go. So that's dictated by your overlap on these ends. So we know that our front is 17 inches wide, and we know that these pieces need to be 17 inches plus whatever overlap you've decided. So once you know what your overlap is, you measure that plus your distance here, then the width of the cushion, and then your other piece here. It will vary depending on what cushion that you're making. The only real difference in the construction here is instead of sewing these seams, you just fold them. And once you've folded that, you'll sew the other seams. This will make sense as we go through. So if you want to make a simpler version of this with a bit less sewing, just make this as one rectangle. It can help to mark everything out on your fabric first so you understand where you're folding and sewing. I'm not doing it this way, so I shan't go into depth. I'm going to do it with the materials I've got. There's a few ways we can do the next stage. One of them is going to be the easiest. If you have some pinking shears, and I've had these a while, these are probably your quickest, easiest way of doing it. They have zigzag sort of edges on the blades. You get different shaped ones, but this is probably the most common. And these stop things fraying. And they give you a little edge like that. So that's your quickest, easiest way of doing it if you don't want to do lots and lots of sewing. Failing that, you can just fold the edge over a little bit and then just sew along it with your sewing machine as normal, and again that will just help prevent it from fraying. Because I have one, I'm going to use my overlocker, and all we need to do is go around the edge of every single pattern piece with the overlocker, and then construction can commence. My chair being noisy there, but that gives you just a nice tidy edge, and especially on a fabric like this satiny stuff, this frays like crazy, so this will be a really good way to stabilise this particular fabric. You will notice it's only binding the edges. That's because I have a little bit of a tension problem with this thread, which gives you the straight line. So at the moment I'm using this like a 3-string overlocker rather than a 4-string one. It's fine, it does what we need. It's just, yeah, I need to get this serviced really and find out what's actually wrong with it. Good job, small friend. Let's get big friend out so we can do the next one. I've got all my pieces here done, all the edges nice and tidy and ready to go. What a little trooper. Big friend. As usual, I'm using the old mid-50s Singer 201K. This is a semi-industrial home machine, and I've had this thing for absolutely ages, and it just continues to be a reliable old workhorse. No need for a modern machine, especially with a project like this. I am currently threaded up with pink, and I think I'm going to change that to a brown because most of the colours I'm using here are brown. Yeah, I think I could probably get away with this, but it is better to match your colour of your thread if you can. It just looks a little bit nicer when you're finished. I have one thing extra I need to do here because there's a little bit of top stitching visible on this, and I've got 3 different fabrics. This one is a very busy print, so I can get away with just about any colour as long as it's in the right kind of ballpark. I mean, even this brown is going to disappear into it, so this one doesn't really matter what colour I use. These, however, are very different, And if I use either of these threads on the wrong fabric, it's going to show up, and I don't think it's going to look deliberate. So I need to wind on a couple of these bobbins, or spools. I always forget what they're called. I always get the name wrong. And to do that on the 201K, I might as well show you since we're here. So your thread that you're doing, you put on this post here. The thread goes around this tension wheel, up here to the spool. So you need to wind it a couple of times on there. Now, these have some little holes, and the one nearest, that one, has a little locating dowel up here. Just there. Not sure how well that will be visible to you, but you just sort of rotate your wheel until it clicks into place. And you push down this chrome lever, and that holds the tension here. It helps guide your thread, and it pushes this rubber wheel against your drive wheel here. Next thing to do is you need to disengage the clutch. There's a knurled chrome knob here, so just turn that towards you. That disengages the clutch. I do recommend keeping a finger just above this, because sometimes these can jump off. Not so bad with these older style ones, but the tall ones, like the Gutterman ones and this style, they can really get very active. And then you just press your pedal at the pace you're comfortable with, and off we go. And once you've got about as much as you need, you lift that, pop that off there, and you're done. It's as simple as that. I'll do this for the brown, and then we will get on with the next stage of construction. Our next task is to sew over the opening for the cushions. And if you are using a patterned fabric, make sure that your two halves are lined up properly if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, because the last thing you want is your pattern to get reversed. So the two edges that I've turned meet up, and you can see the pattern is the same direction there. You don't want to end up accidentally doing that. And I've just realised that this pattern is almost indistinguishable when it's upside down from when it's the right way up. So it probably wouldn't have mattered that much on this one, but the point still stands. Now, I've been doing this so long I don't think about what size this measurement is, but I know that my hem I want is about the width of my finger, which is also roughly the width of the foot on this sewing machine. This fabric is quite springy, so I've pinned this one. You don't always have to. It usually, on a straight line like this on a square, it will usually just hold what you want. And we will be pressing this afterwards to make sure it has a nice sharp edge. Just go whatever speed you're comfortable with on your machine, and it's just a nice, simple, straight stitch. There we go. It's a good match, that thread. I ended up using a different brown that I'd got because I realised the one I picked out was slightly heavier weight than I wanted for this. We'll do this with all of the pieces that we need to do. I will change to the gold that's there when I do the gold pieces. Funnily enough, this brown that I've used on here is exactly the same on here, and you really can't tell. A busy pattern is great. You can generally use whatever colour you fancy. These pieces are all ready to go now. This one's all overlocked on the raw edges, so are these two, with the addition of the opening there being folded over. You do end up with just a slightly visible overlock seam there, but you're not going to be turning these inside out when they're on your sofa or whatever, so that's fine, don't worry about that. You can go to the trouble of matching your threads and things for that if you want to. It's not really important. What is important is making sure that your order of construction is correct. I've also just noticed a weird thing with this plush sort of knitted fabric I'm using. It's showing some zigzags on the camera, which it doesn't in person, so I don't know what that's about. Anyway, you want to take the bigger of your two overlap pieces first and lay that down onto your solid side. Because this is a knitted fabric, it has deformed slightly as it's been overlocked. We can correct that when we actually sew it together. So this is why the construction I'm going to show you is the way it is in this case. If you're just using the same fabric for both sides, you probably won't have this problem. But because I'm using a knitted on one side and a woven on the other, it's just a little bit extra thing to be aware of. So we've got our big piece down, and then you take your small piece and make sure this hem that you've turned is touching like this. So one points this way and one points that way. And your smaller piece wants to overlap the bigger piece while everything's inside out, and your corners up here are aligned. The first thing you'll do is pin these edges, but don't pin this edge or this edge. Leave those open for now. Just these two. Run those on the machine, and then we'll do these. The reason for that is if you pin all of these and you sew around your square, especially when you're using a knitted fabric, the whole thing can warp and skew, and then your cushion will never be straight. The filler that you put in it will always rotate round inside it, and you'll have really ugly cushions. We don't want that, so this prevents that. I shall pin these and sew them and be right back. We're very nearly finished now. I've got all of those sides sewn together, and it didn't distort or warp, which is fantastic. The other advantage to actually sewing with this overlap method, with a fairly generous overlap, is that it keeps all of this nice and secure here, so you don't need to worry about any stressors where you put the pillow in and out, because it's nicely protected. This part is sort of optional. You don't need to do this if you don't want to, which is just to go around and take off all your loose threads from the ends of all your seams. Best to do this when you've actually finished the whole thing rather than part way through, because, well, it's just best practice really, and it means that you have that final check to catch anything, like if your sewing machine has done something silly and you've not noticed while you've been sewing, you can catch a seam that might not have been completed properly, and it's just nice to give everything a once over. If you really want to, you can clip these corners. I'm not going to bother because it's not really necessary. Generally speaking, the fabric you're going to be using to make cushion covers is a little bit thicker, so you can usually get away with it. And they're cushion covers, so how particular do you really want to be? Not everything has to be high fashion. So to turn this out, find your corner and simply turn it out. And your finger should be enough to push that fabric out into a corner. You don't need it to be a super sharp finish, it can be a little bit round like this. I'm happy with that, you should be too. Doesn't matter how long these took you to make. If this is your very first sewing project and it's not perfect, don't worry about it. We all start somewhere, and it's a good idea to just appreciate it's all a process. No matter how long you've been sewing, even a simple project like this can go a bit wibbly wobbly, and sometimes you surprise yourself and they turn out really nicely. So there we go, those two fabrics go together really nicely actually, I quite like that. And when you turn it out, you have the pocket there that your pillow will go into, your cushion. So let's go and do that. This camera angle is not great to show you the finished article, but yeah, that's it, we're done. They are as easy as that to make, which is super.